Most of the townspeople of Bedford Falls have crowded into the living room of George and Mary Bailey. At the center is a table piled high with cash. People are laughing, talking, crying, and cheering as more and more money accumulates. Suddenly, George's war hero younger brother Harry appears on the scene with Ma Bailey close behind. "Harry, what about your banquet in New York?" Ma asks. Harry replies, "Oh, I left right in the middle of it as soon as I got Mary's telegram." Ernie, the town cab driver, hands Harry a cup. "Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town." The crowd erupts into cheering and applause and breaks into a heartfelt rendition of Auld Lang Syne. Most people think that this concluding scene is the best and most important scene of the Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life. After all, everything turns out great. George is rescued from his overwhelming dilemma by the townspeople. He sees the value of his own life and the value of relationship. No man is a failure who has friends, George realizes as he reads the inscription written by his angel Clarence on the title page of Tom Sawyer. What a profound message to end the film with. That last scene may be the most heartwarming of the film, but it's not the most important one. No, the most important scene in this classic of all classic films is a little recognized, often overlooked scene right in the middle of the movie. Because of Uncle Billy's mistake, George is about to lose his business, his livelihood. All that he holds dear will be lost. How will he be able to provide for his family? What will they do? Where will they go? In desperation, he does everything he can think of to remedy the situation, including a last-ditch attempt at groveling to Mr. Potter, his arch-enemy, but to no avail. George ends up at his friend Martini's bar and restaurant. He sits at the bar drinking and wringing his hands. The full realization of his problem is hitting him hard. He has nowhere else to go and no one to turn to. As the camera closes in on George, we see the bags under his eyes, his messy hair, his unshaven face racked with pain. With hands clasped to his face, George says, God, dear Father in heaven, I'm not a praying man, but if you're up there, if you can hear me, show me the way. I'm at the end of my rope. Show me the way, God." And that, my friends, is the most important scene and the best message of the film. Why? Because in that scene, George Bailey represents what all of humanity knows in our desperation, in our greatest pain, in our most difficult time of need, whether self-inflicted or brought about by outside circumstances. We cry out to God. And the good news? God hears us. In an interview in 1987 to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the film, James Stewart, the actor who played George Bailey, said this: "As good as the script was, there was still something else about the movie that made it different. It's hard to explain. I, for one, had things happen to me during the filming that never happened in any other picture I've made. In one scene, for example, George Bailey is faced with unjust criminal charges and not knowing where to turn, ends up in a little roadside restaurant. He is unaware that most of the people in town are arduously praying for him. In this scene, the lowest point in George Bailey's life, director Frank Capra was shooting a long shot of me slumped in despair. In agony, I raise my eyes, and following the script, I plead with God." As I said those words, I felt the loneliness, the hopelessness of people who had nowhere to turn, and my eyes filled with tears. I broke down sobbing. This was not planned at all, but the power of that prayer, the realization that our Father in heaven is there to help the hopeless, had reduced me to tears. Frank, who loved spontaneity in his films, was ecstatic. He wanted a close-up of me saying that prayer, but was sensitive enough to know that my breaking down was real and that repeating it in another take was unlikely. But Frank got his close-up anyway. The following week, he worked long hours in the film laboratory, again and again, enlarging the frames of that scene so that eventually it would appear as a close-up. I believe nothing like that had ever been done before. It involved thousands of individual enlargements with extra time and money, but he felt it was worth it. So yes, the most important message from It's a Wonderful Life isn't that the townspeople came through for George. It's not the fact that one who has friends is truly rich. It's not the notion that George realized his real value to all who knew him, and therefore life has value, even though that's true. No, the most important thing we can take from this message of the film is the power of prayer and God's willingness to lovingly answer prayer. In Isaiah 59:1, the Lord says, "His ear is not so dull that he can't hear you, and his hand is not so short that he can't save you." In Psalm 34:17, he says, "My eyes are upon you, and I'm attentive to your cry." The word attentive here in the original actually means that he is listening to you, he hears you, he's considering you, and he's giving ear to you. Remember this Christmas that God is there. He hears your prayer. Are you crying out to him?